Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gary Summers, and welcome to Mind, Body, Soul, a show about your mental, physical, and spiritual wellness. My next guest will take you on a magical journey embraced by Mother Nature, from reclaiming her lost soul after working in the corporate world for 20 years to helping her mother to heal after her terminal cancer diagnosis to healing herself after almost losing her life in a bicycle accident. Lesley will share how nature uplifted her every step of the way. After 20 years of successful yet unhappy working and living in Toronto, Lesley decided to follow her calling, helping people create healing environments both internally and externally with nature. It was only after her near-death experience Lesley fully understood the healing power of all the elements. She now spreads this message through her joyful, awe-inspiring talks, accompanied by her uplifting nature photography, as well as her upcoming book, Awe for Humanity, Awakening Wisdom from the Elements. Her mission is to lovingly empower others, individually and in groups, as they awaken to their magnificence within and all around them. Welcome, Lesley Bridger.
Thank you, Gary. I'm delighted to be here.
Lesley, just can you give our listeners just a brief synopsis of what you're going to talk about today?
Right. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I went from working in the corporate world to becoming an energy healing expert. I'm going to share how I've seen nature miraculously heal people. And then I'm going to lead the listeners through a short meditation, because anybody can use the power of nature to heal.
Okay, great. Lesley, when did you realize that Mother Nature was important to you?
I realized that when I was a child. When I was a child, I would love going outside. I always felt better outside. As soon as I woke up, I was outside. And my mom, it was difficult for her to get me in. I think most listeners will remember a time like that. When we're born, we come in with that knowledge.
I remember growing up, Mom used to have to go look for us to come in to eat because we were always outside playing this and playing that. Today, kids are not like that.
No, they're
not.
Kids
they're in watching the TV or on their iPads or iPhones, and I'm just wondering how much that contributes to, children's anxiety, because they don't get exposed to some of the stuff that we've done, because there were no video games or anything back then. We just had to make our own fun.
That's right. I think it is definitely contributing to anxiety and depression and stress, and that's why I'm here doing what I do, to help reintroduce the power of Mother Earth.
And maybe as people and parents and mothers and fathers listen to this show, maybe they'll come to some realization that the kids need to be outside and play around and get away from the TV, because when you look at the statistics of how many hours kids spend in front of a TV and in front of an iPad, it's scary.
Oh, it is. And not just a couple of hours on the weekend. They really need to be outdoors a few hours every day, even in our weather. As my friend Benny Dalton says, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing.
And I know Benny really well, and I can see Benny saying that. Have you always made getting outside in nature a priority?
No, unfortunately. I mean, I knew the power of nature. I got my first camera when I was 9 years old, and I went from taking photographs of people to taking photographs of nature. And I remember in high school, my parents lovingly looking at me and saying, "Sweetheart, you take amazing photographs. They're beautiful, but you'll never make money as a photographer. So you better go to university and get a degree so you can get a real job. And then you can have photography as a hobby." So that's what I did. I was at MUN struggling for years, struggling. I went in pre-med, I went food sciences, computer sciences, and then I realized I had enough math and stats courses, which I did for fun. I know, that's a little crazy. I had enough to graduate. So I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in math and statistics with a minor in computer science, not knowing what I was going to do. And then I went up to Toronto because I couldn't get full-time work here. This was in the 80s, 1986. And I ended up being hired by a marketing department in a company there. I was a stats analyst, and I very quickly climbed the ranks. And I worked in marketing for 20 years in Toronto. I left the corporate world and I helped my partner start a business, an ergonomics and disability management business. And I was doing the marketing to grow it across Canada, which we did. So we had an office in Toronto, an office in Vancouver. It was very, very successful. But I wasn't outside in nature. I wasn't. I kept forgetting to go outside because I was so busy. And then I realized, oh my goodness, I felt awful. And that's when I started to go outside because I was waking up crying every morning. It was crazy. I knew that I needed to go outside in nature because I always felt better out there. So I went from hating my life, and even though I looked successful, our business was bringing in almost $1 million. I mean, we were at the peak of our career. My partner and I, we were looked up to in the community. I had all this money, and I kept thinking, there's got to be more to life. There's got to be more to life. So when I would go outside in nature, I would start to feel better. Whew. And so I would go out more, and then I would bring back my camera, and then I started to have photography exhibits. And what I did was, I thought, well, I mustn't be the only executive who's feeling stressed. So I would have my photography exhibit, and then I would have nature music on Walkmans. I don't know if any listeners remember
Yes.
Walkmans. So I would have Walkmans around the exhibit space where busy people could come and listen to nature music and just sit in front of one of my photographs. I didn't understand the benefits of it that I do now.
And so you're obviously not the only person who has felt that anxiety, but what you did was you understood the difference between existing and living.
Right.
I saw a great quote that came across on Facebook or something, and the quote went something like this: if you can't find joy in snow, you'll have just as much snow, only less joy. Which really says a lot about you want to complain about the weather and
Right.
and that. So Lesley, when you went outside and felt so good, was that the moment, or was that the beginning when you started to realize that nature had the power to heal?
Yes, it brought me back to my childhood when I remembered that. And I realized I started healing for 2 years. In the midst of my busy day, I would learn about energy healing, about Reiki, about nature. And I read a magazine once, and it opened up to the page. I opened it, and it was the power of nature to heal. And it was like a light bulb went on in my head. And I said, yeah, I know that. And then I went online, and I found hundreds of studies that show, done by reputable people, by physicians and other people in healthcare, that showed that nature helped people to miraculously heal, even though that's the beginning of how I started on this journey, because I could feel in my heart, this is what I need to do.
So that feeling of wellness that grew inside of you was basically the motivation for you to continue going. So if that can happen to you, that can happen to anybody.
It can. It really can, yes. And it's easy.
Lesley, can you just talk about the healing power of nature and how you see it working, not only for yourself but for others?
Right. So I understand people who look at this and think, well, that's a little woo-woo and airy-fairy, because I was one of those people. I'm very left brain, as I mentioned. My degree is in math, statistics, and computer science.
You have to be left brain.
Yes. So for me to truly say, if somebody had told me 20 years ago that I was going to be talking about nature and healing and speaking to the trees and all of that, I would have thought they were crazy. I would have. So now I'm here to just help people open up their minds. So for 2 years before I left the business world, I was dipping my feet into this area, learning about nature and healing and all of that. But I was afraid to tell my friends. I didn't want them to think I was crazy because they all worked in the corporate world. And then I finally got the courage to leave the corporate world on December 31st, 2000. And 4 days later, on January 4th, my mother, who I'm from Newfoundland, my mother lived in St. John's, was diagnosed with terminal cancer and given months to live. Now, I knew that I had been prepared in the previous 2 years because now I didn't know anyone who had terminal illness, but I was even guided to read books about terminal illness and how people miraculously survive. And nature, healing with nature, was one of them. So I flew home and to spend 5 months with my mom. I don't know if listeners remember 2001, that was the worst winter in Newfoundland history in 100 and something years, where we had 21 feet of snow. I'm a nature photographer, but I was a slide photographer at the time. And what I was guided to do before I came home was take a whole bunch of slides. And I gave my mom slideshows of my nature images set to calming music. In her living room, I would set up the screen and the slide projector, and I remember right away, she said, "Oh my goodness, I feel so much better." And after the second time I did that, she said, "Could we invite other cancer patients over?" So before long, I was giving slideshows of nature images to a room full of 20 cancer patients in my parents' living room.
Wow.
It was amazing. They all felt so much better. Now, my father was a pediatric radiologist, so a doctor, and he was looking at me like I was crazy. 6 months after my mom's diagnosis, now he saw her first CAT scan. It was stage 4 cancer. It had metastasized in her spine and in her ribs in a few places. And so from his experience, it didn't look good. She may live 2 years, but she wasn't supposed to live past the summer. So that's why he was looking at me like I was crazy. He said, "That's it. Your mother's gone. Like, that's it." 6 months after her diagnosis, she went for another CAT scan. Dad came home wide-eyed. He looked at me and he said, "Lesley, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. Your mother's cancer is virtually gone." And so...
I'd never believe it.
Right.
Until I'm sitting across from you and you're telling me.
Right.
Wow.
So Dad, it shifted how he was looking at what I was doing. He wasn't, folding his arms and saying mentally saying you're crazy. He was there, wow. I knew then, and me being the left brain person, I was there, oh my God, this works. Wow. And so I started speaking across the country about the power of your thoughts and your beliefs, about creating healing environments internally and externally with Mother Earth. But I was still left brain, and I was speaking to a room full of physicians and healthcare professionals, but I was still just dipping my toe in. I was afraid to truly live it and breathe it, because there was a part of me that thought, well, this is crazy, this is nuts, people are going to think I'm nuts. So I didn't totally embrace it. And it wasn't until, so I was speaking across the country, from coast to coast. I was backed up. I had all these talks. But again, I was still going out in nature, but not truly embracing it. And
Which is understandable.
Oh, of course. Of course. And, me being very left brain. Then I had a bicycle accident. While I was living in Toronto, I had a traumatic brain injury. I was in a coma, and I wasn't supposed to live. And then when I was taken out of the coma, my friends and family were told not to expect much. I had such a severe brain injury that I would probably never function again, that I'd never be able to look after myself. And I also did serious damage to the left side of my body, where I couldn't control my left leg or my left arm. I couldn't remember words for things. There was a lot I had to relearn. It was like I was a baby. But when I came out of the coma, there's one picture you can see, and I'm smiling. Not a big grin, but I'm smiling. My eyes are closed because I knew that I was going to be okay. I came back with so much knowledge, and I totally understood the power of nature.
Lesley, you mentioned the term "come back." Are you talking about a near-death experience that you had? So you died, saw something, and then came back.
I came back knowing that we're not a body with a soul. We're a soul in this magnificent body that's a suit. And that the body that I had hated my whole life, because I'd been sexually abused by an uncle, and I thought that that had caused it. I realized that this body was the suit for my soul. And I saw that we were energetic beings, and this body, this physical existence, is just a tiny pinprick of all that we are. And we're huge energetically. That we are God, Source, the universe. I'm not a religious person. I had stopped going to church, but I saw that we were all this bigger energy in human form. And that the trees are God in tree form. Mother Earth is Mother Earth in God in Mother Earth form. So I understood how, like, the left brain me had to show all these studies and quote all of these statistics whenever I gave talks. But when I came out of my coma and this near-death experience, I understood why nature helps people to heal. Because when you're outside of nature, nature doesn't think I'm not good enough, I'm too fat, I'm too thin. You know, she vibrates at this energy which is pure love. And that when we're around it, we start vibrating at that energy. And I can tell you, for a long time, even after my accident, the left brain part of me was afraid to speak this truth, especially because I just had a traumatic brain injury. And I remember saying something to my father and him rolling his eyes, and I was thinking, well, if I talk about this, that's what people are going to do. And then I finally found the courage, because over the years, to truly embrace this. I've seen how nature helps people to heal from anxiety, from stress, from suicidal thoughts, from helping people to heal from traumatic injuries and illnesses.
When we started this show, one of the things that I wanted was for people to live in hope and possibility, because once you lose that, then you've lost everything, right?
Right.
So what you've basically done is given people a whole lot of hope and possibility, because what I say to people is, if somebody says to you, that's all we can do for you,
Right.
they only know what they know.
Right.
They don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So when you decide to take that and that's the end,
Right.
you've basically given up your hope and
That's
your
right.
possibility.
That's right.
So just can you just continue? And I didn't mean to butt in and get that, but it's just you know, you don't realize the things that we have around us that are free. We need to start looking at what you've done with yourself and with people and with taking. And I'm just curious, the pictures that you showed your mother, was that the only thing that was different?
No, we did guided imagery and visualization. The very first thing I said to my mother when I went home, because in these books that I'd read about terminal illnesses and about how people survive, I said, there's always a small percentage of people who survive a terminal cancer diagnosis. Why can't you be one of them?
Right, exactly.
And she looked at me and she said, you're right, honey, I will be. And so she had the belief that she was going to be well. We laughed, we played, we cried, you know, but she would visualize herself well.
We all have that incredible power within us.
We do.
To heal, not only mentally, but physically. And I know some listeners are probably wondering, well, how can I'm so busy. You know, I've got kids, I've got my work, I've got this, and what are some ways, simple ways people can make this a part of their life?
Right. I understand that question, because as a busy professional, that was very difficult for me. And then I realized that I needed to make time, because otherwise, if I didn't make time for me, I couldn't be there for other people fully. So even just taking 5 minutes at the beginning of the day to visualize your favorite place in nature. You don't even have to be outside. Just visualizing a place, or, you know, looking at a picture of a place that you always feel better about yourself and life. It could be just walking outside your door and sitting in a chair like in your garden for 5 minutes as you drink your coffee or tea if the weather's nice, or dressing appropriately and going outside. It doesn't have to be, 20 or 30 minutes or an hour or more. 5 minutes is fine. And then once you do that, what you're going to find is that you're going to want a little bit more. And so you'll get up a little earlier, or you'll stop doing something so you go out and do that. Instead of listening, watching TV, you may go outside for 5 minutes. Instead of everybody sitting around texting on their phone, right, I'm going to put that down, I'm going to go outside.
We all have, I think it's 84,600 seconds in a day, and so I'm sure people can find some time to help themselves
Right.
feel better.
Right. You know, I had to almost die in a bicycle accident to understand that I am an amazing being, as is everyone else. So I want the listeners to hear that you're amazing and that you're worthy and that you matter and that you need to make time for you. Because if you don't make time for you, something's going to happen where you're going to be forced to make time for you. And you can't be there fully for others if you don't make time for you.
A note came across on Facebook somewhere, and I thought it was so beautiful. And the note said something like, treat yourself the same way you treat someone you love. Because if you can love someone else, then you're capable of loving yourself.
Right.
Which is so powerful. And many people don't do that, do they?
No, they don't. One of the things that I came back from out of my coma was love is the answer, knowing that. And it begins with self-love. Now, I had not liked myself or loved myself for a lot of my life. So that was a huge journey for me in the next few months after I healed. It was healing me, learning to love me so that then I could heal my body. So I think that's the big thing is, how can you love yourself today? How can you show yourself and treat yourself with the love and respect that you deserve?
One of the questions I ask some of my clients is, how old would you like to live? And when they give me that number, whatever it is, I say, what are you doing to get to there?
Right.
Because lots of time people don't even think about what they're doing, and they're doing so many things that are detrimental to living that age.
Right.
I remember a quote I read somewhere where the person said, too many people die at age 25 and are buried 50 years later. So, you know, you don't want to leave this earth having something left. You want to do everything you possibly can, don't you?
Right. Yeah, you definitely do. And that's what I was like beforehand. I was living a life, but I was dead inside. So I understand that quote. And it's what can I do? So many people aren't doing what they really love in life. And I think that's why we become just so disconnected from our world and unhappy and miserable. Like, so many people, I'm trained as a life coach. There's so many of my clients say, well, I don't even remember who I am. I don't remember what I love. And so I just say, just keep noticing what makes you come alive and do more of those things. And notice the things that you do that diminish that don't make you feel good, that make you feel, hopeless.
And just doing the things that you love to do.
Right.
I say to people, you know, if you're doing something that makes you unhappy, stop doing it.
Stop doing it.
If you're hanging around with people who upset you, stop hanging around with those kinds of people.
Right.
Because they're just, I think Amanda Maynard calls them energy vampires.
Right. Right. And that's so true, and that's easier said than done, but really it's making time for you and really figuring out where your energy is being sucked out of you and where your energy is being fueled by positive energy.
Lesley, you mentioned at the beginning of the interview you wanted to lead our listeners through a guided meditation. So would you like to do that now?
So this is going to be very short, but so you don't have to go outside. If you can, that's incredible. You go, and don't be afraid to hug a tree or stand barefoot on the grass. But if you can't do that, what I would ask is you just close your eyes. Think of a favorite place in nature, and if you don't have a favorite place in nature, think of a place, an ideal place, like by the water or walking in the woods. And I want you to feel it with all of your senses, not just, visualizing it, but what are the scents there? What are the sounds? Are the birds singing? Are the waves lapping against the shore? Can you hear the wind against the leaves? Feeling the wind on your skin. Like, just engage all of your senses and just feel that energy, because you know that when you're there, like maybe wading in the water, warm water, or hearing the leaves crunching under your feet as you walk on the path, you come alive. So I want you to feel that inside as you're visualizing walking or wading in the water, whatever it is. Just feel yourself there, knowing that this is actually energetically impacting your body. You are energy. You are so much more than your physical body. And whenever you think of things that make you feel good about yourself in your life, you're actually changing the frequency of your body, which helps your healing mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually.
Lesley, it's a great conversation. Is there anything you'd like to leave our guests with? Some things that they can use right now to make their lives better? Because one of the things I suggest to people is to do a gratitude list. Because when you're grateful for the things that you have, you forget about the things that you don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So is there some things that you'd like to touch on before we're out of time?
Right. Well, gratitude is huge. Because that's when I was lying in the hospital bed and I couldn't control the left side of my body, and everybody was told that I wasn't going to be able to function, I would focus on what I could do. I would focus on my right leg was okay and my right side of my body, and that I was alive. We forget that to appreciate our body, that we can walk, that we can see, that we can smell. So that's one thing. I would just wake up every morning remembering that you are an amazing being, that you are worthy, that you matter, and that you deserve to take care of you. So make a commitment to you that for 5 minutes at the beginning and end of every day, you're going to either imagine a place in nature or visualize yourself well, something that's going to fuel you and your light.
I spoke at a conference in Ottawa last year, and the keynote speaker at the end of the conference, I can't remember his name, but he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. But the thing that was so unique about this guy was that he didn't have any legs.
Wow.
So he showed videos of him walking on his hands. And where there was some places where he just couldn't walk, the people would carry him. And there's some places, if it was okay with a wheelchair, he'd go in a wheelchair. But he walked most of Kilimanjaro on his hands. So when you complain that you have a sore knee or a sore back,
Right.
just think of all these incredible things that people are doing. Thanks very much for taking the time out of your day to come and talk to us. That's it for this week for Mind, Body and Soul. We'll be back next week with another interesting guest.